Hello, my name is Alex Parker. I am a digital content producer here at Atlanta News First. I'm here with Chihbueze Ihouma, who is playing Orpheus in the national touring production of Hadestown, which is hitting the Fox Theater beginning January 10th. Hi, Chihbueze. Tell us a bit
Hey,
about yourself.
Alex. Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to meet you. Originally, I'm from Jersey. Uh, Went to school at NYU, and then a little bit after graduating, got onto this tour, and then have been with it since last year, October. Um, I've never, before going on tour, I pretty much only knew that little tri-state area of New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. So pretty much every place that I've been going to has been a new experience. It's been very lovely to just see one how large our country is in like a literal sense, as opposed to just seeing like a map and like, oh wow, these are completely different climates and different like everything. But also it's been really fun traveling around with these different people. I was also a huge fan of the show before getting onto it, so it was a bit of like a dream come true kind of moment where I was like, one, even just to be a part of it, but then to later on be playing Orpheus. I just feel really grateful about that. And yeah, my favorite and random fun fact, my favorite nut is pistachio.
Oh, man after my own heart. So you mentioned being on the show before playing Orpheus, which is the principal role. So tell us a bit about your history with the show.
Yeah, so I first auditioned for it. Well, actually, I first attempted to audition for it, like kind of in the peak of like the show's popularity in like what was that? Maybe like
That
late
would have been
2019,
like
early
very
2020.
beginning of the pandemic, maybe?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. That's when I first went in. First I just walked into an open call because at the time, being the green actor I was, I had an agent, but I didn't fully understand how that relationship worked. In that, like, I thought, like, oh, they'll just send me stuff and I'll just go in and do my own thing. It's like, oh no, you're supposed to collaborate with them, let them know you're interested in stuff and stuff, yada yada yada. So then they were like asking, like, hey, like, can you come to this audition? I was like, I wish I could, but I'm waiting at the Hadestown open call to try to be seen. And they're like, why are you waiting at the Hadestown open call? And I was like, oh, because I want to be at Hadestown. And he was like, no, don't worry.
That
Go to the other audition. We'll take care of Hadestown. And then I got an appointment to go. And I was like, oh my God. That was the first one where I was just like, learning this industry. But I did that. Like I did a whole bunch of rounds of auditions specifically for Orpheus. And then at the time, again, because of the greenness of myself, I'd done like some like summer shows and like a couple of regional productions, but a lot of the people were fully in the running and along with myself or like seasoned Broadway actors. When we got to like that final callback, they're like, "Yeah, really like you, you're really great. It's just that you haven't led a show of this
yeah.
magnitude, and we want to make sure that like this gets off the ground very strong. So we have to like." But then they were like very open to like ensemble members and like ensemble understudy Orpheus, which is what I ended up being cast as. That didn't happen until later on because the pandemic pretty much like the Broadway shutdown was
Yeah.
on the day of the final callback. And that, yeah,
No.
Pearl Studios was just complete emptiness. And they're just like, yeah, I guess we're going to audition this. And they didn't know what to do in terms of like
Oh no.
ask stuff for like the chemistry reads and stuff like that. So we're like, just sing from opposite sides of the room. Oh man.
So for people who might not know what Hadestown is or even the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice, uh, tell us a bit about the show. What is it about?
Yeah, so the baseline of the show, as you said, is the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice. And in classic Greek canon, Orpheus is sometimes a demigod, sometimes just normal person with godly abilities. And he is blessed with the gift of music. He's this virtuous singer, as well as a very skilled, I guess back in the day, lyre player or modern day guitar. And his power of music is so great that it like makes inanimate objects move and like almost dance along with his song. And he falls in love with this woman slash nymph named Eurydice, and they like are like madly in love with each other. Everything's going great until she's bitten by a snake, and then she dies. And Orpheus is so sad that he can't imagine living without her, so he travels into the underworld with the gift of his song to like let him in, and it convinces the king of the underworld, Hades, to let him try to bring her back. In our version of the story, we kind of recontextualize a lot of things. Both Orpheus and Eurydice are mortal, but they live in this kind of like 1930s Depression era Rust Belt type America, and they're both poor. Eurydice is more of like a wanderer going from place to place, a nomad. And when they meet, they fall in love with each other, yes, but there are some issues, not issues with their relationship, but just of the world around them. Of it's always winter all the time, either hot or like extremely hot or cold, and that's because in our story we also couple the tale of Orpheus Eurydice along with the tale of Hades and Persephone, and that Hades married the goddess of springtime, but she can only be with him in the underworld for 6 months of the year so that we can have spring and summer when she's above ground. And because of issues with their relationship, it messes up the seasons. So Orpheus is trying to make a song to fix the seasons, but Eurydice is like, we need to survive and like figure out how we're going to do things. Thus the friction, thus the conflict. And in our version of the story, instead of it being something like a snake bite or like something other, some type of death that like she couldn't control, our version of Eurydice has the choice whether to go to Hadestown. And in this retelling, Hadestown is kind of like this factory town where you get employed, but at what cost? And that's for you to see when you come see the show.
So what I've noticed over the last few years is there's been a bunch of different retellings of the myth. It's not just the musical itself, it's the album it's based off of that came out in 2010. There's Orpheus and Eurydice play a major part in a video game that came out recently.
Mhm.
So what about this myth, even just at its base level, why is it resonating now?
Hmm. I think, well, one, I think people always love underdog type stories. It's funny in some ways to see Orpheus as an underdog because, like I said, he has these like godly powers and this and that. But at the end of the day, he's still fully immortal and he's walking amongst all of these gods. And he's not like the Greek heroes of like say like a Hercules where he's like super strong and he has the strength of God to do these like huge things and move mountains. He's like, really all I have is my voice. And I think the reason it resonates with people today is that we feel that kind of, when we see ourselves in that, but also we understand what it means to be moved by music in such a way. We understand what it means to make music born out of some type of intense emotion or intense experience that you've had in the past. So the story of Orpheus, which loved someone so much that he sang his way into like the underworld, which is barred from, he's not supposed to be there, he's live, so but he goes there anyway because he loves her so much, and he stands before the mightiest of kings and gods who can easily just smite him down, but he says, please let me bring her back, I'm gonna sing this song to you. And that god, despite everything about him telling him that no, I shouldn't be respecting this tiny mortal, I should just do what I want to, he's moved by that. And I think in our world today, there's so much that we can find as wrong in the world. Themes in the show, like climate change, are something that like we feel very passionately about how certain structures of our like economy, specifically like mixed in with just like with government, we see all these issues of like we want to have our voices heard. We want to be able to stand up to injustices being done, whether from like a class standpoint, from a racial standpoint. We want to be able to stand up to those and say, actually, no, this is wrong. This is how the world could be. And I think the fact that music is the thing that makes that change is something that people resonate with a lot.
So you mentioned when we first started talking at the beginning of the interview, the touring experience. What has that been like for you being on this national tour?
Oh man, it's been a wild time. It's also been a big learning experience for me because there are different kinds of tours. There are some tours where it's like, oh, well, you'll stay in like a place for like 6 months, 8 months, or like you won't go to too many cities, but like you'll be in them for a while. Our tour is more of like almost like one you would like associate more with like a pop, not pop artist, but like with like a band's type of tour, where it's like we're going to a different city pretty much every single week. We're playing in completely new places. We're seeing as much of everything that we can possibly see in the time. Um, it's been definitely a challenge for me personally because I'm very much a homebody kind of person. So, so there's like, oh, I can go to this beach or go to these bars or go to these museums, but I probably would prefer to, chill at home and do so and so. So that's it's a little bit hard sometimes, um, when you're going from hotel to hotel, and as a homebody, that aspect of tour can make you feel very isolated, especially from people back home. But I think the tour gets to really shine the most in two ways. One, in terms of the audiences, because we get to have experiences where it's as because in New York by now especially, but even like when it was really popular, a lot of people already knew about Hadestown, maybe listened to the cast album, maybe had already seen like and are coming to like their second or third or fourth viewing of the show, stuff like that. On tour, all of the most of the audiences, it's brand new for them. Or they listened to that album and fell in love with it, but this is their first time getting to see it in person. And the kind of energy that you get from audiences like that is completely unmatched. And this is very much a show where we rely a lot on audience engagement and energy. It's like a very reciprocal kind of relationship as opposed to just we're giving you this story. It's like no, we want you to come with us on this journey, and so that's one very rewarding. And two, when I do end up being able to get out and go places, it's always very fun, and I'm always like, wow, I should do this more often. Yeah.
So as Orpheus, as like the one of the principal characters, what's your favorite song to sing in the show?
Mm. Well, I got a favorite of mine. So I'm thinking of other songs. No, I'm pretty sure the one that is my personal favorite is also my favorite to sing. I love singing "Wedding Song" in the show. It's one of the first few numbers,
Oh
and
my God. Um, I love Wedding Song. Cards on the Table for those of you who are watching. I'm a super fan. I've heard both the cast album and the concept album that came out, and a Wedding Song, absolutely incredible number. Even
yeah,
just uh on the on the albums in audio
yeah,
format. I've never seen the show, so I'm super excited to see how it translates live.
yeah. I mean, hey, low key, concept album "Wedding Song" is the best one that's been. I even as I'm singing
Yeah.
the current one on stage, there's something about those like the different like twangy guitars. Like it's very
Mhm.
atmospheric and it's very
Yeah, there's
yeah.
definitely something to be said about, how does, obviously like the concept album does things um that you can't do like that. You can't have on Wedding Song, there's that reverb on the guitars
Mhm.
on the concept album. That's not something you can really reproduce live. How does the how does the musical live try to turn what Anais Mitchell wrote back in the late 2000s and recorded on the concept album? How does it make it its own thing? Where yes, there's the concept album, but how does the musical sonically stand apart?
Hmm. Well, from a at least from a compositional place, in terms of what a lot of things that they added a tons of different uh kind of like scenes within songs, like kind of like what we call like recits, and then like there'll be a little bit of story things happen. Like for instance, in something like a wedding song, it's right before that song is this really cute scene between Orpheus, Eurydice, and Hermes, where Orpheus is first like trying to introduce himself to Eurydice, and he just comes out with his full heart, just like I love you, basically. And then she's just like, who are you? So there's like lots of moments like that. And then within Wedding Song, there's a bit of a continuation, even though like the main core of the song is the same from what it was on the concept album. There's a little bit of a continuation of that banter, that back and forth in more scene form. So from a vocals and like actor standpoint, that's I'd say is the main difference in addition to obviously all of like different songs that were added in or like lyrics that were changed to like try to focus more on pushing the plot forward. I guess yeah, that's probably the second biggest thing is that lots of songs keep their musical core, but the lyrics are very different. Like for something like let's see what's the best analogy I could give to that. Something I know this wasn't technically on the original cast album, but like Anyway, the Wind Blows, for instance, that was a song that Aeneas had written and then eventually like decided for on her own and decided, oh, like actually let me try to use this in Hadestown. And it has a lot of very poetic verses and lines. Same with like lots of the epics. They have a lot of these very poetic verses and lines, but and as beautiful as they are, and they work very well in a concept album or just any kind of album setting, when it comes to on stage, especially when it for people who like in stages where you might not catch every single word, it's hard to push the plot forward on just full poetry alone. And so sometimes like songs not necessarily are simplified, but like the lyrics are contextualized to kind of to help the main plot points come to the front, as opposed to being beautiful verses of rhyme and of poetry that you'd want to re-listen to and then eventually dissect. The goal is now that like on the first listen you can get pretty much all the plot points, and then when you listen again and again you're like, oh, here this callback to this, like one that like she says now in Anyway Limbo, she says people turn on you just like the wind, and when you first heard that you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like she's talking about how like she can't trust anybody, and then you know the show and then listen to that and then you're like,
Oh, okay. I see where this is going.
exactly.
What is your favorite song in the musical that Orpheus is not involved in?
Okay, my favorite song that I'm not involved in. I mean, I guess in terms of singing, he's not involved in this song. I do really love Way Down East Town. I'm gonna be listening a bunch because I don't know if I can make them all. If I can choose a favorite. I love Way Down East Town. Um, I love Our Lady of the Underground.
Once again,
Those
man after my own heart. It's that and Wedding Song are to me, the standouts on the both the concept album and the cast album. Absolutely incredible songs.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then is there another one? I think in terms of all the ones I'm not a part of, those are definitely the favorites. And then one thing I've come to appreciate a lot and like look forward to is whenever we have different Hermeses go on for the show, and then they have just Aeneas and Rachel and like the full creative team were very about letting everyone have their own interpretation of these characters, whether that's from a musical standpoint, from a physical standpoint, just from a general like what they think the arc of their character is type of place. So all of our different like understudies and leads have completely different interpretations of each character. And so when it comes to Road to Hell, one of my favorite things has always just been hearing how each Hermes will attack that song, because it's so freeform and it's just like it's just him singing. So it's like, look, I'm gonna do whatever I please. So that's also been a favorite of mine. But in terms of songs in all aspects, those two from before.
You mentioned that, when even when you're singing, you hear Justin Vernon from Bon Iver off the concept album or
Yeah.
Reeve Carney. What do you try to do to make yourself stand apart if somebody, decides to dive deeper into the show, go back and listen to the cast album or the concept album, what do you try to do to make yourself stick out as Orpheus in someone's head?
Yeah, I mean, I try to do a couple of things. One, even though this might sound counter to what you would think to be like, oh, it's a stand out. What do you do? I love listening to a lot of these different versions and then just being like, yeah, I'm gonna do that. Like there's this one like little riff thing that Damon Dono from the Off-Broadway cast that he does at like somewhere in the middle of Epic 3 where like on like the See How He Labors, he like does this like little like lift up and I was like, huh, it seems like no one else is doing that. We're gonna bring it back. We're bringing it back. Or um just like the general like say like kind of almost bluesy laid back-ish vibe that Justin Vernon had on the original wedding song. It's like, that might be a bit of a challenge to incorporate into this version of the show, but I'm up for it. Let's see what we can do. And yeah, like I think I try to bring a lot of soulfulness to Orpheus in the songs that allow for it. So in something like a wedding song, in something like a Living It Up on Top, even a little bit in chant, I try to add a little bit of soul texture to it. And then on the flip side, when it comes to the epics, I try to make I got very inspired. I'm sure I also feel like other Orpheus in the past have as well. But like when I hear those epics, I immediately think of three people. I think of Justin Vernon, I think of Jeff Buckley, and I think of Labyrinth. One of my favorite singers. Who for those who don't know him, he composed the score for Euphoria on HBO, and
That's a
and
very
so
interesting trio of influences.
they're all wildly different, but I think it's like there's a certain purity and lightness that each of them bring to their falsetto work. And that is the kind of thing I try to strive for when I'm doing the epics, especially because I love how it makes the epics contrast so strongly, both to Orpheus, the rest of his stuff, but all the stuff in the show. Like that's like one of the big things that brought me to the show was just the fact when I first heard the album, I was just like, huh, like I don't think I know a male lead for a Broadway show that sings mostly in his falsetto, and like that's like like that's the main selling point. So that I was just like, why not lead into that as opposed to like, because like there's a world where I can go full Rock of Ages and start like sprouting some of these moments, but I think there's a real beauty and it adds a really nice texture to the show as a whole, keeping those moments very pure, very light, very. I think that what gives it its kind of otherworldly feel. And so, yeah, that's one thing I like to do. And then also in an interesting way, even though some songs I like to be a little more like laid back, as I said, and like kind of sit in that like bluesy soul pocket. I found it really interesting the how musical something like the epics are, even though I feel like normally there's a lot of like you can sing it very freely, you could be like kind of back phrased here and there, but like honestly when I first was looking at the page of the music, I was like, there's something really nice just about how it like how when it like it's like kind of in the meter and it kind of goes along. So those two things within the epics are the things I try to bring. And then otherwise it's just like I'm just a completely different person than all of these other guys that have played the part. So naturally things are gonna come out. I might give like in terms of like character things on stage, like it's always gonna be different from actor to actor.
Chihbueze, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. Hadestown comes to the Fox Theater January 10th. I am super excited to see the show. So should you. Chihbueze Ihouma, thank you so much.
Of course. Thanks for having me on, Alex.